let's talk about state aid, which obviously is not that light. But I will try to keep it short because I don't want to steal too much time to your coffee. And anyhow, I will just give you some hints as said in the agenda, but of course I will remain available also later on for further questions. So, state aid, where it comes from. This is a law, this is a basic policy of the European Union, which is ruled in the treaty for the function of the European Union, Article 107. So it is something that all the programs, all the member states have to deal with. It's like public procurement. And the results of not applying state aid is also something similar to public procurement. You have amounts which are not eligible, and then you have to return. And this is very important to be kept in mind. So state aid is, happens when all the following criteria apply. So if one of these criteria does not apply, then you don't have state aid. So the first is that the recipient of the aid, so the entity which is involved in your project as a project partner, for example, is an undertaking. This means an entity which is performing in an economic activity in the project. Here there is a big casuistic on what is an economic activity. It can be basically anything. From the Commission definition, an economic activity is any activity for which a market exists. For me, it will be difficult to think an activity for which a market doesn't exist, but still there are some, like, for example, police. Judiciary activities, but still there is, in this regard, there is also a nice guideline from the Commission. You will find the references in our manuals, which tries to summarize what is an economic activity and what is not. But anyhow, for you, in order to understand whether in your project a partner is doing an economic activity, the good question is there anybody which would be interested to do this same activity out of a remuneration? This could be a question you could pose to yourself. However, so the first requirement is that there is an undertaking performing an economic activity in the project. It could be an undertaking which is performing economic activities outside the project, like an SME, but in the project they are not performing an economic activity. It could well be. Then the aid granted through the project gives an advantage, a benefit to the undertaking, meaning that receiving the funds from the project would give an advantage in the market that this subject, this undertaking, would not have without receiving outside the project, let's put it in this way. Then there is state aid if, as a condition, this aid is selective for certain undertakings. So, for example, if I have an activity in the project which is addressing SMEs and only SMEs, this is selective because the large enterprises are not involved. So there is already selectivity there. Or if the funds I'm granting through the project are especially for a sector, for a specific sector, could be, I don't know, automotive or consultancy in a certain field, then there is selectivity. And then, last but not least, the aid which is given through the project is distorting the competition trade between member states of the European Union. I'll give you an example of this. You might have a museum which is by nature an economic activity because it is in the entertainment business. So a museum is competing with other museums, and they are also competing with other facilities like cinemas or theaters or whatever. So there is an economic activity. There is, let's say, normally museums, in order to get in, you have to pay a fee. So you have to pay a ticket, and therefore there is also an advantage for the owner of the museum or the manager of the museum if you give a contribution for restoring the museum. And of course, since you are granting to that museum, this is selective, so it is not you're not giving the same opportunity to get the money to other players in the entertainment business. So it is selective, but maybe this museum is very local. It's only dealing with local markets. It's not attracting, let's say, people from outside the region or outside the country. Therefore, since this requirement is missing, it is very local, this museum, there is no state aid. Let's say if you have a big museum, which could be, I don't know, in Berlin or in Vienna, the Albertina Museum. In Vienna, this is a big museum attracting a lot of people also from all over the world. Therefore, there you cannot say this is a local museum, but you might have also a specific local museum only for certain characteristics in a small and remote area. So it has to be seen on a case-by-case basis. How do we handle with state aid? First of all, what we try to do is to manage state aid. So we are aware that a project which is very much result-oriented, which is very much doing practical things on the ground, it is also likely it might have some state aid issues. We manage it. So first, what counts for us is the quality of the project, as mentioned by my colleagues before. Then, if the project is of high good quality and there are state aid issues, what we want to do is to manage these issues. We do not tend to exclude any project just because it has state aid issues. Absolutely not. What we want is to have projects which are really compliant with this policy. So the program approach is to apply the de minimis. This means that there are ceilings up to a certain level of aid which can be granted to a beneficiary in order to remain within the de minimis. These thresholds are 200,000 and 100,000 for the road freight transport sector. There are even lower thresholds for agriculture and fishery, for agriculturals as well as fishery and aquaculture sectors. And then there is no possibility to give de minimis in case of export activities, which is not really the case for our projects. But however, what we do is to look at your project, look at the partners involved in your project, try to see if there is an undertaking performing an economic activity in the project, and try to see which economic activity is affected in the project. In other terms, is there a specific project activity or a specific deliverable which is state aid relevant? Yes, then in this case, we consider de minimis aid only the public contribution given to this specific activity. We don't say the entire budget granted to this partner is state aid, because we try to really look in a very precise way only to that part of the project which is state aid relevant. Accordingly, since there are ceilings, there might be also some reductions. We have to keep in mind that these ceilings apply in the 3 years, so the current year and the previous 2 fiscal years from when the aid is granted. So when, in case of approval you will be requested already in the submission phase to inform us on the previous de minimis received. In case the project is approved, before entering into the contract, we will ask to those partners which are affected to prepare and to draft for us another declaration on the previous de minimis aid. And if there is, I don't know, that this specific project partner has received 150,000 euro in the previous 3 years under the minimum, the budget for state aid relevant activities in this project cannot be more than 50,000 because the threshold is 200,000. Of course, the partner is allowed to receive public contribution for non-state aid relevant activities. This remains not affected. In order for us to assess whether there is state aid relevance in the project, we ask all the partners and lead partners to fill in a declaration, which is part of this lead partner and partner declaration. There is a section devoted to state aid. This declaration is very long. It contains also a lot of information on and guidance on what is state aid, how to fill in the declaration. We understand that state aid is a topic which is very complicated and very difficult to follow, because it is based not only on legislation, let's say on rules and laws, but also on jurisprudence. Therefore, it is really something difficult to understand even. But still, that's why in our declaration we try to put there as much guidance as possible. So in this section of the declaration, you have to start informing whether you consider that you are performing as a partner an economic activity within the project. If yes, then you are requested to describe which economic activity, or what you think it is an economic activity, and if no, then you can continue. So if yes, you have to fill in section 3.2, which is meant to describe, according to you, what advantage you will get out of the contribution of the aid you receive within the project for performing this economic activity. So following this criteria I showed you before. Keep in mind that section 3.2 is not to be filled in case you marked no in all the questions which were under 3.1. When we published the call, this was not so clear in the template of declaration. Therefore, last week we issued a new version of the declaration. Please check on the website, on our website, where we just specified in the title of 3.2 to be filled in only if any of the questions under 3.1 are marked as yes. This is the only change which took place in the template. So then, as a next step, you have to fill in the section 3.3, which is informing on aid given to third parties. You might have that the project partner is receiving some direct aid from the program for performing economic activities, but you might have also the case in which the project partner is not receiving aid, but is transferring aid to somebody else. It could be the case, for example, of an agency, a regional development agency in the project, which is project partner, which is also organizing a training for SME for free. This training for SME for free is an aid granted to the SME, which are participating for free to this training. So in this case, there is a transfer of aid, and that's why it is called indirect aid, from the program to the final beneficiaries, which are normally the target groups of the project. And in this section, you have to provide information in this regard. And then there is a last section, 3.4, dealing with some declarations on the status of the applicant vis-à-vis the minimis aid. Some tips for filling in the declarations. First of all, as I mentioned before, there are guidance boxes and footnotes at the end of the document. They contain important information and guidance. Please read carefully. Of course, as I said, state aid is not the easiest topic to deal with, but still, there is a lot of information there which you can take and get in order to better fill in your application, your state aid declaration. Second, be accurate when drafting descriptions in the text boxes. If you consider, for example, you are performing an economic activity in the project, and then you are requested to describe which work package and which deliverable and which output you are considering as state aid relevant, please mention it. Quote the number of the deliverable, quote the number of the output in the declaration, because this helps us then to identify only those little parts of the project which are state aid relevant, and in order just to limit the, let's say, the occurrence of state aid to the specific activities and specific deliverables which are state aid relevant in the project. To answer no, in order to avoid state aid relevance, is not really an option. I say, okay, I have to declare whether I'm state aid relevant or not. I mark no, so I'm sure that, so nobody will bother me with state aid. This is not true, because first of all, we anyhow assess your proposal, we anyhow assess your involvement as a partner in the project. And if even if you consider no, but we think that there is a state aid relevance, we will also, of course, say, okay, there is state aid relevant, even if you didn't detect it. But this would just result in a longer process for getting from you additional information. Even if you say no, and then we also don't detect any state aid relevance because we don't realize it, but at the end of the day, there is a state aid relevance, this is risky because, as I mentioned before, the non-compliance with the state aid policy means having expenditure not eligible, meaning that you have to return the money back or you can receive less money from the project. So let's say to say no is not smart. You have to think what is the reality of your project. You have to tell us what you think, and then we will see. We had, in the first call, many cases in which the partners marked yes. They said, oh, yeah, yes, this is state aid relevant. But then, when we assessed, we came to the conclusion that this was not state aid relevant. So the fact that you declare that there is a state aid in your project doesn't mean that there will be, at the end of the day, state aid. It is assessed by us. So nothing happens if you say yes, and then at the end of the day, there is no state aid relevance. Opposite. If you are really sure that there is no state aid relevant, and then we detect state aid relevance, and we detect that there is something dealing with state aid in your involvement in the project, again, you are not punished. The project is not assessed differently. This is something completely separated from project assessment. So the message here I want to bring you is try to be realistic. If you think there is state aid relevance, describe it. If you think there is no state aid relevance, fine, it's also okay. No problem. We will not punish you if then we detect state aid relevance that you didn't detect. It is just a process in which you help us understanding better your role in the project. Last but not least, as I mentioned before, the declaration is long. I would really suggest you to start soon to fill in the declaration because it takes time also to understand how to be filled in. So do not wait, please, the last minute.